Former Indian envoy to Pakistan and Canada, Ajay Bisaria, has written a book, and it has come up with some very interesting details of various events that he was privy to. I am in conversation with the former diplomat. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to NDTV.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Bisaria, let me begin with a question that you talk about in terms of policy dilemma against terror. And you go on to say that how India's restraint had perhaps sent a wrong message to terrorists and backers in Pakistan. I'm going to quote a part of your book. This is, of course, in the context of 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. You say that in case India had reacted in 2008 the way it did in 2016 or 2019 with a surgical or airstrike, a strong Indian response would have entered the security calculus of Pakistan and served as a disincentive for the Pakistan Army's support of India-focused militant group, something that you reiterate.
Absolutely. I think this has been a dilemma for India, not in recent times, but for 3 decades, ever since we've started facing terrorism, and I would argue even from the 1980s. The question before India and Indian policymakers has been how to react to it. So the argument I make is that perhaps in 2008, India's response was not sufficient, it wasn't adequate, it was over-reliant on diplomacy and not enough reliant on the use of hard power. I make a deeper point that India has suffered terrorism in the 80s in Kashmir, in the 90s, in the 80s in Punjab, and then in the 80s and 90s in Kashmir. And if we had crafted a response to this sub-conventional warfare by Pakistan even earlier, we could perhaps have saved ourselves from a lot of bloodshed and loss of lives.
Would you say that there was reluctance on the part of leadership in 2008 or an over-influence of diplomats? Because you go on to talk about High Commissioner Satyabrata Pal, who was in continuous engagement with Pakistan, and his counterpart in India, they were peaceniks. So did the government at that time rely too much on diplomats?
No, I think that would be oversimplifying it because, diplomats do diplomacy. The question is, what are the kind of tools available to you in your whole policy toolkit? And the issue here was that India had to have both the capacity and the will to be able to make those choices. And the argument is that India now has an answer to Pakistan's sub-conventional warfare as expressed in 2016 with surgical strikes, in 2019 with airstrikes, that it is dealing in the sub-conventional space where you have, a kind of warfare or proxy warfare below the conventional realm of battle. And I think that is something that is going to serve India well in dealing with the Pakistan issue.
Even the worst critics of Prime Minister Modi do say that his dealing with Pakistan has consequently resulted in, less acts of terrorism here. And this will be seen as a big success. What do you think changed? Was it messaging? Was it tonality? What changed?
Well, I think both the capacity and the will changed. Because what happened in 2016 as an answer to Pakistan's terrorism, India decided to take much stronger steps than it had in both 2016 Uri and 2019 Pulwama. It's not that Prime Minister Modi did not attempt diplomacy. 2014 and 15, remember, was a period when he engaged with Nawaz Sharif. Nawaz Sharif was here for his inauguration, for his swearing in, and Prime Minister Modi himself made a visit to Pakistan towards the end of 2015. But we finally managed to craft a response to terrorism which entered Pakistan's calculus that this would be a cost that Pakistan would have to pay, whether deploying state actors or non-state actors.
So you agree that Prime Minister Modi did make an effort, but what was so different in his reaction in comparison to his predecessors, say Dr. Manmohan Singh or Mr. Vajpayee, because backstabbing was something that India had faced in the past as well, every time it dealt with Pakistan.
Yes, so I think here you must take in more variables and talk about the compulsions of the times. So I would argue that in Prime Minister Vajpayee's time, he was acutely conscious of the fact that India had gone nuclear in 1998, and there ought to have been a strong nuclear responsibility in dealing with the Pakistan issue and in dealing with the world. And what Prime Minister Vajpayee did was try to understand the nuclear threshold of Pakistan and the red lines. So I feel that by 2008, that threshold and those red lines were clearer, and therefore we perhaps needed a much stronger response in 2008, the absence of which led to perhaps more acts of terrorism, greater audacity on the part of Pakistan. And the fact that this government took the risk and took it a step forward and took hard action against terrorism is something that is going to stand India in good stead in dealing with terrorism.
When do you think India managed to dehyphenate itself from Pakistan? Because for the longest time, what we had seen was that if any world leader would visit India, it will be also with Indo-Pak, visiting both the countries.
Well, I think the dehyphenation moment really came in this century in the end in 1999. Because I think in the perception of world leaders, there was, South Asia was a trouble spot, as you say, in the 80s and 90s, and world leaders used to visit both countries. But I think what changed in 99 after Kargil was that it became clear to then President Clinton and the Americans that there was a huge difference between one hugely nuclear irresponsible power led by its army chief Musharraf, who had come to Kargil and tried a kind of adventure under a nuclear umbrella, and India, which was acting with a huge degree of restraint, using both diplomacy and hard power to achieve its objectives. And I think that became fairly clear to the US, and that also accounts, I think, for the change in attitude towards India in many quarters.
Congress leader, Mr. Bisaria, Rahul Gandhi has said that Western diplomats have told him that the Indian counterparts have become very aggressive, that there is a great degree of arrogance. You know, many would say that this is a political statement, but as a career diplomat, what really has changed?
I think what has changed is a greater degree of confidence. And that confidence comes from the confidence not just in the country and its capacity, but also its leadership and the clear mandates that are available to these diplomats. So now I think Indian diplomats have clearer mandates on what they do and they say and how they interact with their counterparts. They do it with a greater degree of confidence. So I would term it confidence rather than use any other adjective.
Okay, before I go back to your book, and because these are essentially sum and substance of your book, you know, we have often seen these videos emerge from the streets of Pakistan, which is about grudging admiration, one would say. Is that the sentiment that you got before you left Pakistan?
Yes, something is changing. There is a change in mood among the people of Pakistan. And I would say that, you know, a large proportion of the population is young. And younger people have fairly common aspirations. They also have common tools and access to common bits of information like social media. And you would see a huge gulf between what the official narrative is in Pakistan and what you would capture in social media and younger Pakistanis talking about it. And certainly I would say there's been evidence in recent times of an admiration for India and sort of regret and questioning of their government, which has landed Pakistan in the kind of economic crisis, the polycrisis it has, and where it has a easily benchmarkable situation in a neighboring country which they could aspire to.
Okay.